Bonjour tout le monde, welcome to French class. Today we are going to learn about the indirect object pronouns. In French, we call them les pronoms compléments d'objet indirects. If you remember, and I would like you to review those, last semester we saw and studied the direct object pronouns such as le, la, les, elle apostrophe. And we studied them and we saw that usually we use them to replace a noun that is built directly after a verb. So we use those pronouns. You see, pronoun means instead of a noun. So we use those pronouns to avoid repetition. That's the important aspect of those pronouns. So depending if the noun after the verb is built directly after the verb, we call them the direct pronoun, and you will use one of those. If the verb is here built with a preposition a plus a person, then you will use an indirect pronoun, but it says always to avoid the repetition. For example, here, j'envoie un courriel à mon frère. I am sending an email to my brother. So, you know, sometimes when you ask a question with the noun and the answer, you don't want to use the noun again, so you are going to use a pronoun. So depending if the verb has a preposition a plus a noun, you will use the indirect. If there is no preposition, you will use the direct object pronoun. So here we have a plus mon frère. We are going to use lui. Je lui envoie un courriel. I am sending an email to him. Sorry. But be careful because sometimes in English you do not have the preposition to. For example, does she call her parents? But in French, when you translate the sentence, usually it is est-ce qu'elle téléphone à ses parents? So most of the time you will have the preposition to in English, so you know that you need to use the indirect object pronoun, but not all the time you will have that too. But in French, if you use a verb like téléphoner, you will remember that téléphoner a to telephone to someone, really. Then you will use, if you want to replace à ses parents, you will use leur, which is the plural form, because you need the indirect object pronoun. So, as we saw, we have lui and leur. So you are going to use the indirect object pronoun with a noun that is masculine or feminine, but it is singular. So to replace in English him or her. For example, je parle à mon frère. You see the verb and then you add the preposition à. So I choose to use that verb because it's obvious in English is to, so it's easier to remember. And to recognize. Je parle à mon frère. I talk to my brother. Je lui parle. I talk to him. In French, you will also use lui for feminine noun. Je parle à ma sœur. I talk to my sister. Je lui parle. I talk to her. What you notice here, just like with the direct object pronoun, you see in English that this is the difference between French and English. You will place the direct or indirect object pronoun in front of the verb. In English, it follows the verb, right? So, je parle à ma sœur, je lui parle. Same thing. The indirect object pronoun is placed just in front of the verb. In English, it's after the verb. Another example here, because the one with telephone, oh, I forgot the accents. Here in English, you want to say I call him or I call her. You don't see the preposition, so you will have to remember that if in French you want to use téléphoner, it builds with the preposition à. So, je lui téléphone. So, I call my friend. Je téléphone à mon ami. Leur is for a noun, is to replace a noun that is masculine or feminine, but it is plural. Example, je parle à mes parents, plural. Je leur parle. I talk to my parents, I talk to them. Again, here the indirect object pronoun is placed in front of the verb. So same as with the direct object pronoun, you also have the me, te, nous, and vous pronoun. For example, elle me parle, she talks to me. Again, here the pronoun is placed directly in front of the verb. Je te parle, I talk to you. Il nous parle, he talks to us. Je vous téléphone, I call you. Again, I'm using téléphoner because in English you have call to call and doesn't build with a preposition, sorry, but in French it does, therefore you need an indirect object pronoun. In negative sentences now, est-ce que tu parles souvent à tes cousins? Oui, je leur parle souvent. Right? That's the normal sentence, affirmative sentence. Now, in the negative sentence, remember, just as we always did, you place the pronoun in front of the verb and the negation surround that block. Je ne leur parle pas souvent. So you will use leur here because you have the preposition à with a noun that is plural and here it's masculine. Est-ce qu'elle téléphone souvent à sa mère? You have a preposition à, you have sa mère, you will use lui. Indirect object pronoun. Oui, elle lui téléphone souvent. Negative sentence, lui is in front of the verb and the pronoun and the verb form a block and you place the two parts of the negation around that block. Non, elle ne lui téléphone jamais or elle ne lui téléphone pas souvent. So you do have a few exceptions here with some verbs. You have more verbs, around 20 verbs. I only chose 3 here, the one that you may encounter. Some verbs that are going to build with the preposition a won't take indirect object pronoun, will take a pronom disjoint. So I try maybe just to remember those 3 verbs and at least, maybe penser à. So, because they're very useful, those verbs. Penser à, to think about, rêver à, to dream about, and se fier à, to trust someone. So, as I said, there are other verbs, but I'm just giving you 3 here to, in case you encounter them. So, those verbs will build with à, and you will have a person, but instead of using lui here, because that's the pronoun we should use, we are going to use a pronom disjoint pronoun, and you're going to keep the preposition and add elle if the noun is feminine. Je pense à ma mère, je pense à elle. Je pense à mon père, so here same thing. Oh, forgot an accent again. À mon père, instead of using lui, as we just saw in the previous slide, no, you will use lui, but you will keep the preposition à, and therefore it is a pronom disjoint here. Je pense à lui. Je pense à mes parents, instead of using leur, you are going to use a disjoint pronoun à eux. Je pense à eux. So you keep the preposition and you add eux. That's the form of this pronom disjoint. Je pense à mes amis. Here we have a plural feminine. Je pense à elles. So those are exceptions. You don't want to focus on the exceptions. You want to focus on the previous slide, but just in case, because those verbs are very useful, even this one. So you want to remember if you are using penser à plus a noun of a person, you will need to use a pronom disjoint and not an indirect object pronoun. Voilà, merci beaucoup. I hope it helped. I will see you in the next video. Au revoir, merci.